Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. So I kind of felt a little bit frisky this week. I'm really excited about the fall movie season. I used to do two versions of this show, or twice a week. I would do the box office review, and then I would do like a preview for the upcoming weekend as a second show. I decided to sort of, at least this week, maybe next week, we'll see how I feel, to bring back kind of a shorter preview episode of what's coming up this weekend. This weekend's really exciting, so I decided to just go for it and talk about what's coming out this weekend. You know, obviously the big story last weekend, without a doubt, was It, right? I actually got around to seeing it this week. Wow, what an interesting movie! What an interesting phenomenon. I, from a personal perspective, did not enjoy the movie that much. I thought it was pretty good. I was actually expecting it to be a lot better than it was. I think I would give it kind of like a low to mid 70s score. It certainly was very well done. And for the budget being $35 million, it was kind of incredibly well done for that amount of money. But it just, I don't know. For me, it just didn't connect. But my opinion really doesn't matter that much. Like, what this is all about is, you know, how well it did at the box office and how well it did connect with audiences to get people hyped. You know, it's not like there's normally $100 million opener rated R, hard R horror film, and it is hard R within the first 10 minutes of the film. Not to give anything away, but like there's dismemberment of a young person. I don't think I've ever seen that in a movie before. I think the last movie where I saw a kid get killed like that was probably, God, I want to say like the Walking Dead pilot, and then also an old movie, but Dawn of the Dead, the George Romero remake. Remember, he shoots those kids at the abandoned airport, and it's just like, so that was really shocking when that happened back in, what was it, 78 it must have been. But I guess the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that it is not a soft R film. It is very violent. It's very scary. Yeah, I guess it is scary. It kind of feels like a haunted house ride, the entire movie, especially the middle, like 60%. I really liked the opening and I really liked the ending. The middle 60% was definitely kind of like, it felt like a new scare every scene. But very well acted, very well done. And people really loved it. You know, it didn't make $123 million on accident its first weekend. Now, a lot of that had to do with hype, right? A lot of people were just so hyped about it that, I don't know, that it connected with so many different people on so many different spectrums and so many different demographics. Like, that's what gets you a movie that if it just played well with horror fans, it would have made luckily, if it was lucky, 30-40 million bucks opening weekend just for the horror fans. And that would have been a massive opening. That would have been one of the biggest horror openings ever. With the fact that it doubled sort of what I would call the genre audience, which I include myself in. I pretty much see every horror film that's out there. Doubled that audience and then some. You know, it played 4 quads, which I think going into this weekend, I don't think anybody really expected. I think the most optimistic projections, and I was in that school of thought as well, was like 80-90, with like 90 being like this overwhelmingly great number. But 123, I'd never heard anybody say anything near that. It just was incredibly surprising across the board. And I talked at length this last Monday show about, you know, what it means and all that kind of stuff. And it may have been a little bit of a rambling episode, so I apologize for that. It's just like, it's very hard to quantify and like put into words for people who haven't been following the box office and who aren't big horror fans, like how meaningful this opening is. I think it changes the game for the whole genre, which I think is amazing. I think we're going to get a lot more big budget horror films that are going to be awesome. In any event, so, you know, it is expected to win its second weekend pretty easily. You know, drops is sort of where it gets kind of interesting. Like, what sort of percentage are we talking? 123 was so big, right? I mean, the normal average film drops about 50%. So that in and of itself says it's going to make about 61.5 or 61, somewhere around there. That's possible. Horror films in general tend to drop a lot more than your average film, just because they tend to be sort of like opening weekend events for people. People go and want to get scared, and then I don't know what happens, but that audience tends to dry up pretty quickly. Even movies that open up really big, like I think Freddy vs. Jason or something, I can't remember. Some movie opened at like 40 and like barely made it to 80. I think it was Freddy vs. Jason, or like the new Friday the 13th maybe. That's sort of like the MO of horror films. It just feels like everybody wants to rush out and see it and get terrified, and then the audience just sort of disappears after that. I don't feel like it's the same, just because it ended up being a pretty four-quad movie. It wasn't just the genre audience. But I'm thinking a higher drop than 50%. I'm probably thinking at least maybe like a 58% drop, if that makes sense. That would, I guess, where would that put that? At like a 52 range. That's sort of in line with like what other publications are saying. I'm not really a publication, I'm an amateur, but honestly, when it comes to box office stuff, sometimes the amateur stuff that I read is 10 times better than what the pros say, what people get paid to say. There's just something about like amateurs and box office stuff where it's like we take it to like another level because we're so passionate about it that, like, I don't know, I think I almost trust more what box office nerds say than what Hollywood Reporter is going to say. In any event, they sort of say the same thing. They're saying 50 million plus, obviously. Box Office Mojo usually has the most well thought out predictions, I would say, without a doubt, actually. They actually go through like per theater averages and think about it in a lot of different ways and have a really nice long write up about this. They're putting it at 56.5. I'm putting it higher than that. I'm saying like 52, 53, just because there's a lot of reasons. The big reason is that it felt like an event film, and it's also a horror film. So it's almost like has that double sort of whammy against it. It felt like everybody wanted to see it opening weekend, and it became like, oh, my friends are going, I've got to go. It became this social meme event thing to do. And horror films, and I had so much to write a paper on it or something about like why, or a case study or something, why horror films are so front loaded. I don't know if I have a really good understanding of why. I sort of throw out like, oh, it's like people want to get scared, but like, what does that have to do with it being front loaded? I don't really know. So I'm kind of drawing a blank on that. But that's the pattern. So it kind of crosses off both of those boxes. So I'm assuming that it's not going to have a sub 50 drop. It's not like a children's film that's going to like drop 40% for the next 12 weeks. It's gonna have a big significant drop, I think. But it'll still easily take the number one spot for the weekend. What else is coming out this weekend? It's not too crowded. You know, it kind of has a good runway here for its second weekend. It's staying on like 4,150 screens, so it's by far the most saturated film out there. The other movies coming out, the big ones, the wide releases. The biggest new wide release is American Assassin from CBS Films. It's going to open on 3,154 screens, which is basically a decent opening. It's certainly not super saturated wide, but it's definitely a wide opening. I believe this is based on a book series, maybe. I might be guessing about that. I saw the trailer about 2 or 3 months ago. It's got Michael Keaton in it. Kind of plays like an old spy dude. From what I gather, and I'm sort of making this up, so if I'm wrong, don't, rake me over the coals or whatever. But the trailer lays it out pretty perfectly. A young American dude is on vacation somewhere. Clearly there's like an ISIS, Al-Qaeda terrorist attack. And then I think his girlfriend or his wife or fiance gets murdered in this attack, and then he basically, for the rest of the movie, becomes like this terrorist hunter and goes around killing people. Now, normally, if I just heard that premise, I'd be like, oh my god, snooze alert, like it just sounds so stupid and so boring. Like, we have all these Jason Bourne movies which are essentially like tourist action films. It's like, no, we're in Berlin, now we're in Paris, now we're in, Virginia. Like, all these films exist. Like Jack Reacher, there's just a lot of this stuff. It has been, as long as I can remember, there's been films like this. It's like a straightforward revenge action film that travels a lot of places. That's essentially what it is. But when I saw the trailer, and from my own personal viewpoint of film and what I like, I'm not gonna see it. I got Movie Pass. I can basically see any movie I want for like nothing. I'm not gonna see this movie. It just seems like I grew up in the 90s, so like I've seen every single action movie you could possibly think of that came out in the 90s. The only new ones I'll see are like John Wick. Like, that's it. Like, I've seen everything. Like, I've seen it all. I know exactly how it's going to play out. I know exactly all the beats and stuff like that. Despite the fact that the Jason Bourne movies were good, they're sort of like the same thing that was in the 90s. At least John Wick kind of did it in a different way and playful enough where it's worth seeing. So for whatever, my perspective, who gives a shit? It seemed a little bit tepid, just from what I was watching. But. It actually looked very well put together, and I think the storyline will hook in a lot of people in America, just because it's like in the 80s we were fighting the Soviets, and the Soviets are always the bad guys. In the 90s we didn't know who was the bad guys, so we just made up whoever. It actually ended up being terrorists, ironically, usually Arab terrorists. Now the bad guy's so clear as day. It's ISIS, right? It's ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So I think it's gonna give, I don't know, it's gonna give like people a little kind of a rah-rah, like, let's go kill these guys, kind of like cheer for him type mentality. And I think it's gonna play well probably outside of the big cities. I don't see it playing well in New York City, but I see it playing well in like, and I always use the same cities as like metaphors for like different demographics and classes and cultures in America. But yeah, like a San Antonio, like a Norfolk, Virginia. I just see it sort of maybe a little bit more conservative areas. I see it playing pretty well. Box Office Mojo is saying 14.5 million. Hollywood Reporter is saying about 12 to 15 million. I mean, let's take the 14.5 million and kind of look at that just a little bit closer. So 14.5 million playing on about 3150 screens. You're looking at about a $4,600 per theater average. That seems pretty respectable, and I think pretty accurate. I would go, I don't know. The question is, if someone's going to the movies this weekend and they're a person who would see American Assassin in some hypothetical world, are they going to go out of their way to see it? Or are they going to go see it? Or are they already seen it? Like, those are the big questions, because I think there is a big audience for this film. And by big, I don't mean like blockbuster. I mean like a nice kind of little breakout, I could see it doing maybe 5,000 per theater, and that would put it at about $15.7 million. That feels like a little bit more accurate to me. I'm gonna say like 15.5 just to be safe. And normally what I used to do in the show is I would write down these numbers and I don't have time to do that work anymore, so I'm just gonna say 15.5 million, and you're gonna have to sort of see what I say, see if I'm right or not. I don't know if I'm ever gonna go back and check these. I think it's going to do decently well. The things going against it are it's Lionsgate and CBS, so the marketing was not great at all. It was very sort of pedestrian marketing. Didn't really stick out to me at all. I don't know. A lot of it, you were talking about marketing, you talk about touches. How many times do you touch a person? Not physically, obviously, metaphorically. And it felt like this movie didn't have enough touches. Like when it was coming out, I saw the trailer, I was like, whoa, why have I never heard of this really? It felt like they needed to start more earlier. Like I would have liked to see more marketing probably in the June. I would say July would have been a really good push. August, you're kind of like, it was really quiet. Also, why didn't you release this in August? You know, obviously it's not going up against a ton of competition right now in that genre, but it has just been so massive. It might suck a lot of the air out of the box office this weekend, even in its second weekend, that like a lot of people who would have seen American Assassin back in the middle of August aren't going to see it now just because it's out, and they'd rather go see that because it's a bigger movie, right? And everybody wants to see that movie. Who is saying, oh, I'm going to see American Assassin, and everybody else is like, oh, I got to go too. No one's doing that. Like it's not that type of movie. So I think it was kind of a mistake to have it in September. It is a quiet month. It would have been better in August. But depending on the quality of the film, I should probably look up the Rotten Tomatoes score. That would be the professional thing to do. 45% in Rotten Tomatoes, not great. So the legs aren't going to be good. You know, got about 10,000 people say want to see it on Rotten Tomatoes. That's not bad. Not a lot of reviews either. It's opening right now, technically. 45%, but only 58 reviews. There's something about this one that just, it felt kind of lesser, kind of like a lesser release. And you could tell that in the marketing a bit. So I don't know. I think the $14-15 million number feels right to me. The industry is saying like 11 to 14. So like, okay, that's not that much lower. I do think it's going to play well with a certain type of people. So I feel like more like a 15, maybe even a 16 feels more accurate to me. Just because despite the fact that it is in the theaters, like there's not a lot else that's out there. Like you got Hitman's Bodyguard, Wind River. It's just slowly racking up cash. Whoever made that choice, and I insulted them probably early on when it came out. I was like, why are you releasing Wind River in August? What a stupid idea. Or I think it was July technically. But they really made the right choice. But that being said, small film. Hitman's Bodyguard is petering out, despite making all of the sort of August leftover numbers, winning by just default because it was the only big movie out. You know, I feel like there is a space for this film right now. There's a slot that it fits in, and the audience is, and I think people will go out and see it. That the big sort of factor there is how much do they market in the last couple of weeks. I don't watch a ton of TV right now, so like, and online I didn't see a lot of them. But you know, if they marketed it in the right territories in the last week, I could see it hitting 15, 16 pretty easily. But that's American Assassin. I think it's going to do all right. The quality suggests the legs won't be phenomenal. But let's say it does like a $15 million opening. Because it's smaller and because it has some runway here, a little bit of runway, I'm going to say it does maybe like 45 million, about 3x multiplier. I would say like 40 to 45 is pretty safe. I don't see it going much higher or lower than that. So that's the biggest wide opening this weekend. The other movie that is opening, I think, is a lot more interesting. Mother is opening. And where do you begin with this film? So it's Darren Aronofsky. The last film he did, I think, was Noah, which I've never met somebody who's seen Noah. Like, I love him as a director, especially his earlier work. And I could honestly talk about him for a long time. I mean, he got famous because of Pi, right? It was a kind of a very arty experimental film that is very good. And he's kind of been doing his own thing since Pi became a little bit of a breakout hit. It wasn't financially a breakout, but it certainly was in the art circles and sort of film nerds, a big film. But he's probably much more known for, or got more famous for, and more clout for, Requiem for a Dream. And that's what really solidified his status as an important filmmaker. And then things like, I think The Wrestler put him up in that sort of like, wow, is he like one of the greats level? Because that's my favorite Darren Aronofsky film. And I think it's just wonderful. I think Mickey Rourke's performance is. Did he win the Oscar for that? I can't remember. But Oscar worthy. Evan Rachel Wood was also in that. And she's phenomenal. He's just a really fascinating guy. He does his own thing. He's one of those directors where he's basically got a blank check to do whatever he wants for the most part. Black Swan was okay, but I think it's what's interesting about Black Swan. I think Black Swan allowed for him to have a more mass audience. I remember seeing that in New York. I think it was opening weekend, and it was like packed, and people were all about it. And it was like a really weird set of people that I wouldn't expect to see at a Aronofsky film, right? It just seemed a little bit more mass appeal than I was expecting. Obviously, the fact that Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis get down in the film didn't really hurt it with a lot of people. But it was definitely a breakout film for him. Even before that film, I guess he had The Fountain, which I thought was an absolute train wreck, and kind of to me a canary in the coal mine for his work, because I didn't like Black Swan that much at all. It felt like a Lifetime movie with a huge budget, and like a lot of like cool wizardry and great psychological lenses that he used and angles to sort of make you feel like you were like breaking down your identity as you were watching. It was so wonderful, like that part of it. But like the story is like, what? Who cares? It's felt like a Lifetime movie. Any event, so Noah did not do very well from what I remember. And Mother is a return to horror for him, which is kind of like, and he said that he wanted to make a movie that was like Black Swan. Just rewinding a little bit, Black Swan did about 106 million total back in 2010, so 7 years ago. Noah did 101, actually better than I thought. Maybe because of the biblical stuff, people got into that one. That was 3 years ago, back in 2014. So it's his first movie in 3 years. He doesn't make movies that often. He's very much a guy who takes his time. Mother. Okay, let's lay it out on Mother. So, lay it out on Mother. What the fuck does that mean? So the trailer dropped, and when I saw this on paper, I immediately invested in Hollywood Stock Exchange. And here's why. It's got Jennifer Lawrence in it, the biggest movie star in the world right now, I would say. Javier Bardem, who is wonderful, and people love him. He's not just like an artistic actor like he was 10 years ago before No Country for Old Men. He's like a big star now that everybody recognizes. Ed Harris, Michelle Pfeiffer. I mean, come on. Like, this is like, this cast is absolutely stacked. And when I saw the trailer, I was a little bit less excited about it because it seemed a little too just psychological horror. Like, oh my God, they're all in this house alone. Ed Harris shows up. The Michelle Pfeiffer shows up. Things start getting weird. She's like having a mental breakdown. And I was like, what is this? Like the yellow wallpaper? Great short story, by the way. It just seemed very trite, and it reminded me a lot of Black Swan, where it was like, okay, like I get it that you can show this cool effect that's supposed to represent her psychological state. I get that. I'm not an idiot. I get the metaphor, but at the same time, it was like, I don't know if this is really gonna have a strong story or narrative to it, and that's one of his issues. Is that he's such a technical wizard in terms of cinematography and just creating a vibe and a feel. Sometimes he forgets that writing good, interesting characters and a very tight narrative structure matters a lot to a film. I tend to be a stickler for that sort of stuff because my background is in writing and editing and narratology and all that stuff. But that's what, The Fountain is a perfect example of where he just goes off his rocker. Black Swan is also an example where it was like, really? Like, it could have been a lot more tight in the story department. And that's the feeling I got from Mother was that, like, it doesn't look like it's going to look like it's very psychological and very substancey and vibey and moody, but it may not be a really interesting, tight story. And I kind of wonder if the Black Swan audience that made that movie $100 million movie is going to show up to this. So let's talk about, enough of me talking about the trailer and like what I think about the artistic aspects of it so far. The reason I bring that up is I feel like it's going to be a little bit obtuse for people. And so like the commercial viability of this film right now is tough. It's a horror film. It's a hard R horror film. Whoever made the decision to open up the week after it made a very, very poor decision. Like, I don't know, who was involved in that, if Darren was involved in that. Paramount is probably the worst studio, bigger studio doing business right now. They might not be doing business for long, to be honest with you. I think Paramount and Sony are going to be the first two studios to sort of falter here as the industry changes a lot. I don't think Paramount's going to last very long. And this is sort of an example of why. Like, you have a very well-known, more artistic director. You have Jennifer Lawrence, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, if not the biggest movie star in the world. Michelle Pfeiffer, Ed Harris, Javier Bardem. Like, you have this amazing cast, a very interesting sort of look to the film. I think it's going to hook some people in. But the problem is you releasing it the week after it just doesn't make any sense. Like, give me at least later in September. I don't know what the horror movie picture looks like over the next few weeks, but I might even have released it in August. August was just so wide open. I guess Friend Request is coming out on. Is that a sequel to Unfriended? Maybe not. Maybe it's not. It could be though. That's coming out next week, so that would have been tough. Then you have Flatliners on the 29th. And then you have kind of like Blade Runner. I know it's not horror, but whatever. It would have been tough, I guess. This is one of the only real slots you could put it in. Happy Death Day, which I think is going to be pretty big, opens on October 13th. And Tyler Perry's Mattia Halloween 2, Boo 2. Sorry, opening up on October 20th. Also, The Snowman's opening that day. Not really a horror film, but kind of horror thriller. So I don't know. Like, I feel like there wasn't really a lot of good options here. I guess this was one of the only open weekends for a horror movie. I think it is. Maybe if you could, I think October 6th would have been better for this. Very busy weekend with Blade Runner and The Mountain Between Us, but I think it's going to have a better chance than this weekend. And so, what are people saying about this? Box Office Mojo is saying $12 million. It's only open on 2,400 screens. So it is technically a wide release, but it's certainly not a normal wide release. It's a lot lower than a normal wide release. So 2,400 screens. They're saying 12 million, which I think makes sense. Hollywood Reporter is saying kind of similar. They're not really like committing to a number. They're saying like, 12 to 15, but they're saying that's going to be the same for American Assassin. That doesn't make any sense. Like, American Assassin is opening on a lot more screens. This is why I don't trust Hollywood Reporter, right? Like, they don't even do basic math, right? If you can't figure out, it's not that hard to figure out how many screens it's going to be on, and you have an idea of what the popularity for this film is going to be, like, at least do a normal comparison. It doesn't make any sense. So Box Office Mojo is saying it's making $5,000 per theater. I don't know about that. That seems a little high to me. I guess Jennifer Lawrence is going to bring out a lot of people, maybe. But the thing is, if this is why it's like frustrating sometimes when you're talking about these stats and stuff, because if American Assassin did the same per theater average, it'd make almost $16 million. So there's no comparison here. One's making 12, one's making $16 million. I don't know why Howard Reporter thinks that that's the same. It's not. In any event, sorry, I'm just like ragging on Hollywood Reporter. I think $5,000 per theater, it feels a little high to me, just because everybody just saw a horror film. So it's not going to get that audience. It's not going to get the casual horror audience that will go to a horror film, but not very often. Like, it captured I go to 4 movies a year. This is one of the movies. It was like that social event. That eliminates basically all of those people are out on Mother. The only people who are going to see Mother are Darren Aronofsky fans, J-Lo fans, sorry, J-Law fans. I'm from the 90s. I'm sorry. And sort of film nerds and buffs like myself. That's not, I don't think all of the J-Law audience is going to see this because it's kind of weird. The Aronofsky audience is not massive. And the film nerd audience isn't massive either. So I would put it more in the 4,000 range, which would give it about 9.6 million. I could even see it dropping to the $3,000 range per theater, which would give it 7.2 million. That seems more realistic to me, like 7.2 to about 9.6. I would say, I'm gonna say about 8.5 million bucks for it is what it's gonna do. There's a lot of reasons why I don't think it's gonna break out and do very well. There's not, like, I just basically stated my entire argument, and that's my thesis. Everybody went to go see it. There's not a lot of casual horror fans left. There's a small group of people that want to see this movie, and they're going to see it, and then it's probably going to disappear. There's also some other elements to consider. I've not seen a lot of the reviews. 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it is technically fresh. It's got 8,000 people that want to see it, or sorry, 8,700 people that want to see it on Rotten Tomatoes. That's pretty darn good, actually. It's a lot more than I thought. Even if it does well, this week, let's say it makes 11, let's say it makes 12. There is going to be such a massive blowback to this film. And I say that just from knowing some spoilers and how it ends, and I won't spoil it for anybody here because you're going to go see it. Which isn't likely, sorry. Yeah, I think this has the potential for a cinema score of F. And there's only been like 10 or 12 films, maybe less than that. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is The Box, Richard Kelly, who I love. I love Richard Kelly. I just wish he would make another Donnie Darko and let somebody else edit it, because his director's cut of Donnie Darko is trashy, total train wreck. The blowback on this film is going to be so massive that it may just make money off of the controversy, to be honest with you. There's going to be so many people that are going to be like, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. It's so, like, wrong and immoral. And that's what he's going for. He's going for the shock in that last act. And he's going to get it. And I don't know if he's ready for the backlash. I don't know if he realizes how upset people are going to be. This could be like the Rites of Spring or something. I think that's what it was. The show, the orchestra piece that made people riot, made the audience riot. I feel like this could be something like that. If you're interested, go and see the movie and just buckle up for the last act, because it gets really, really uncomfortable, and something happens that I think will turn the audience against the film, turn the audience against the director, and maybe even Jennifer Lawrence. Like, it's a pretty vicious movie. And so I see it, maybe the only way I can see it doing well, and, like, let's say it opens at 10, 11, whatever, 12. The only way I can see it doing like 30x, or 3x, I'm sorry, like 33 or maybe even up to 40, is if that controversy is so massive that, like, people want to go just out of a sick thrill to be a part of it all. I could see that happening, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't see this thing making more than 30. I think it opens below 10. And I think the controversial ending to it, or the last part of the movie, upsets people, and then people just forget about the whole film. I feel like that's what's going to happen, because it's just so big and massive. That's the stuff that's opening. I don't want to go on too long. I do have to go to bed. It's past my bedtime right now. But that's what's opening this weekend. Really nothing else. A couple of small films. Annapurna's putting out Brad Status. Yeah, God, I don't know what happened in this movie. Ben Stiller, Luke Wilson, Jenna Fisher. I saw the trailer to this, and it actually looked pretty darn decent. It's opening limited. No one's going to see it. It's like literally DOA. It has Netflix streaming written all over it. I have no idea why they would release it in the theaters. Complete waste of time. And that's it for this weekend. Next weekend, we have Friends Request. the Kingsman sequel, and then the Lego Ninja movie, which does not look very good, to be honest with you. And then it's like I said the last couple of weeks, it is just foots on the gas until the end of the year, until January. We may not, like I say, we may not take a break again until August. Like, it's just like, it's nonstop now. They got four wide releases on September 29th, and then you're in October, and then October through the end of the year is super, super crowded. Anyway, so that's sort of the preview show. I will be back on probably Sunday or Monday with a review of what happened the weekend. Thanks for listening. This has been the Wildline Podcast.